Okay, folks, so let's begin to explore this question. And I really feel that for the whole of this week, this 8-day week, we've been exploring different elements of presence, because it's so fundamental to how we show up when we're engaging with other people, when we're working in concert with people, and when we're performing to an audience. And so there isn't anything that's left out of that, what our feet are doing on the ground, what our sitting bones are doing on chairs, what's happening with our breathing, all of those things stay connected to us, and we stay connected to them. And then in performance, I think for many of us, what's partially frustrating, partially an issue is that so much of our thinking can be outside of ourselves and examining from a different vantage point. How well am I doing this? How comfortable am I? Am I enjoying this? Am I at ease with myself? And I think all of Feldenkrais is about that. But I have had a chance to see some of the wonderful things that my colleagues have been doing, and put some things together that I hope will give you a very direct experience of bringing that attention inside. So let me give you that sound, those of you who weren't here right at the beginning. We're going to be playing with a sound, and the sound we're going to play with is VOO. So it starts with the V sound. And the V is a fricative, so it has a lovely, the friction that's created by the pressure of the breath creates a nice vibration through the system. And so when you're playing with the V sound on its own, you already get some nice buzzy sensations. So just find your V sound and see what it's like to sustain it. Feel the air passing between your lips. And be aware that you may feel some sense of internal vibration inside your skull. And that internal vibration may have a shape that isn't quite the same shape as your skull. So just notice anything interesting about that. And then add the sound oo, which you can add in an internal sense without it having to make a huge difference to your lip shape. So your V can become VOO with a slight shift to what you're doing with your mouth. So have a little play with that sound. See if you can find something interesting or enjoyable in it. And it's going to appear in this lesson in a very similar way. Those of you who were here yesterday and were working with Emma, she introduced the lovely bell hand process, and I will go over that again for those of you who weren't here. But the process of engaging the hands in movement, it gives us an opportunity to quiet the whole of the nervous system. Your brain thinks your hands are enormous. And what happens when someone's a musician and they spent a long time improving and increasing the skills that they are able to manifest with their hands, when that happens, you end up with an even larger amount of neural territory, of brain and nervous system territory engaged with your hand. So if you soften and free the movements of your hand, you can very quickly start to feel your whole self responding. And the VOO has some of the same potential for that as well, the vibratory quality, what goes on in your larynx, what goes on in your lips, what goes on in your facial structure is also, for your brain, a very large and significant amount of territory. So you make a sound and you maintain the sound, and you begin to draw some of the energy that might be generating anxiety back into a quieter place. So we'll come back to that. But now do come and lie down. And for most of this lesson, while you're lying down, it's probably going to be most useful to have your feet standing. But do adjust them as often as you wish, according to your own comfort. Mouse is back. So that's it. Come and lie down and spend quality time with the planet. We lie down and we surrender to gravity. We allow ourselves to sink backwards into the floor. And this image of backwards relates to, I think it was Rebecca who was talking about how we orientate ourselves in these lessons. In these lessons, when the way we use language is to talk about up as being in the direction of your head and above your head, not up in relation to the space that you're in. So in this position, lying on your back, your arm moves forward towards the ceiling. That doesn't mean we won't occasionally say up. There's clearly a gravitational process going on, but a lot of our language will be designed to bring you back internally to your own sensation, what's up for you, what's down for you in relation to your whole self. That kind of self-orientation is a lot of what presence is about, being able to be inside your own structure, relating to gravity in your own individual way. So now you're all lying down, just begin to look for comfort, begin to sense support. Feel how as you sink backwards into the floor, you're getting lovely, comfortable, powerful place to rest yourself. Notice what connects, what contact you feel. And this beginning process of coming into ourselves and surrendering to gravity, reconnecting with our planet beneath us, all of that can in itself be a lovely practice. You don't have time to do anything else. And then explore the voo sound in this position and just see what it's like to make the voo and see what resonances and what vibrations you feel in this position. Just get comfortable with it as a sound you can come back to and play with whenever you feel like it. And start to get a sense of your whole spine as it lies on the ground. Bring your attention right down to the lowest part where the coccyx is, your little leftover tail. Bring your attention there. And then let your attention gently shift upwards through the whole spine to where it attaches. I think Marilla was particularly clear about how high up into your skull you can feel that connection from the spine. And then this will be clearer if you close your eyes, so I hope you're comfortable to do so. If you close your eyes and bring your attention inside and allow yourself to feel the space between your eyes. Have some sense of what it's like to ask yourself what that sensation of internal space might be. Allow yourself to be comfortable with there being no clear answer and certainly no verbal answer. So just find how deep inside your skull do you sense the back of your eyes? And how far from the back of your nose are the back of your eyes? Notice as the air comes in through your nostrils that you get some sense of that internal territory, because the air's a little cool as it comes in. And then still with your eyes closed, picture a solid, easily maneuvered black ball resting on the bridge of your nose between your two eyes. Now, the ball is imaginary and it's very well behaved. It won't give you any trouble. It's going to do whatever you want it to do. It's about the size of a large marble, but it can also be a little smaller or a little bigger if that makes it easier for you to picture. And though the ball is imaginary, sitting there right on the bridge of your nose, you are looking at it with your eyes. So your eyes are closed, but they're directed towards the bridge of your nose. And the ball is going to begin to roll down your center. And as it rolls down the center, it remains imaginary, but your eye movements are genuine. So let the ball start to roll down your nose and around the tip, down that little groove in your upper lip that's known as the philtrum, and through the center of your lips, down over your chin, and all the time the ball is rolling, your eyes behind closed lids are following the rolling, down the center of your throat, through the middle of your chest, right over that. Some of you may still have a residual eye in the middle of your sternum. Now you need to have some sense of where your sternum is gazing. It passes through the center of your breastbone, down between the two ribs, down through, now your center of yourself and your navel may not automatically feel like they're connected, but just let that line roll, 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 down, 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 till it arrives at your pubic bone. And then when it arrives at your pubic bone, so your eyes are looking down yourself to a place you probably couldn't see in real life. It's an interesting imaginary game, this eye movement. Let the ball start to roll back up the center and up the center and follow it back. So you're slightly drawing in this line down the middle of your front by going over it, repeating it, reversing this process. So when the ball arrives back at the bridge again, now let it roll down one more time, down the center, filling in this sense of your front central line, dividing the territory at the front of you in half and arriving at your pubic bone. But this time, it arrives at the pubic bone, it continues downwards and backwards over your perineum and arrives now at that coccyx where we had our attention earlier. Now the ball's going to do something slightly different. Now for this, I like to picture a slightly crazy nano ball, a tiny, tiny nano ball that's moving not just in easily access normal material space, but able to move in quantum space, because as the ball is going to help us define the back line, the line up the back of ourselves, it's going to bounce. It's going to bounce between the floor and your spine and your different vertebrae and your sacrum. And as it bounces, you'll feel there's a little bit of room to bounce between the ground behind you and the coccyx, but very quickly you run out of space to bounce, and you're now bouncing in a kind of internal nano space. So what the ball is doing as it bounces is, first of all, something slightly crazy that I hope is fun to imagine, but secondly, it's also gently tapping softly the back of your spine as it bounces, and it can bounce many times. So just let that gentle imaginary bouncing begin to travel up your spine, noticing where there's almost no room to maneuver. It's the sacrum, say, is resting very clearly on the ground, and then as it continues up, bounce, 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 bounce. You come to the lumbar, and with your feet standing, there's probably not a huge gap there, but there might be a bit of a gap, a bit more room for the ball to bounce, but it's tapping its way up your spine and up your spine and up your spine. It's going to arrive at that place between the shoulder blades that you were exploring in more than one session, and then continue up, tapping softly back of your neck, all the way up to the place your head is resting, which is probably close to behind the place where it started on the bridge of your nose. And then it's going to do one more crazy thing, the ball. It's going to roll from the back of your head right over the center of your skull and come over your crown and come back to the bridge of your nose. And because this is in our imagination, it's going to do it without having any problems at all with your hair. It's just going to float through all of that without causing any trouble and arrive back at the bridge of your nose. And now you have a definition around the outside of yourself that is enables you to picture a dividing plane, a plane all the way down the center of you, and make that plane something very pleasant to sense, something warm and moist and comfortable, not anything uncomfortable, but what it is doing is it's dividing you very softly and neatly into your right side and your left side. And it's connecting up with the line you drew down the front, and it's connecting up the line that you bounced along up your back. And then let your attention stay inward and let yourself begin to fill in this plane to get more and more familiar with it. Let's start at the crown. And as we travel from the crown, it starts at a kind of point and then fills out, making a nice soft separation between the two sides of your brain. Lots of our organs are paired or have a paired element. And so as we do this, as we travel down this central plane, we'll have some parts of ourselves that are very clearly on one side or the other, like our two eyes, our two nostrils, our two ears. And some places that are subtly divided into a left and right, deep in the throat. Singers know they have two vocal folds coming together and apart. Are they meeting on this central line? How easy is it for you to start to fill in this plane? And notice that the plane it's like a landscape. Sometimes it's tall like a mountain, from the nose to the back of your head. That's quite a wide bit of the plane, and then you come to your neck and it's a narrower part of the plane. So start to get a bit of an internal three-dimensional image of this plane all the way down until it arrives, and you've got your pubic bone at the front and your coccyx at the back, and that's the front and back boundary of this pelvic floor structure that supports our organs when we're vertical. And maybe when you're ready, you can think of coming up from there. Your pubic bone is actually two separate parts joined together, just as the sacrum is fused. Pubic bone is joined in a slightly artificial manner at the front. So it does have a center, it does have a left and right. And then as you travel up through the middle of your abdomen, you have some organs that are either side and some organs that are right in the middle. But if you come back up and you hover for a moment around the center of your chest, it can be very easy to recognize that you've got a right and left set of lung structures they don't overlap. They're very distinctly either side. And I can go on a bit long with this imaginary stuff and forget that you still need a rest. So just have a little rest, let your attention spread out into the space. Let yourself have a little fidget or wriggle if you want to. You've been focusing your thinking in a very precise way. So it can be nice to rock a little from side to side, have a little fidget. I can see some lovely knee movements. If your legs are long, you can swing your toes a little from side to side. If you like the voo, you can always do a little vooing just to enjoy. Let's fill in a little bit of, when you're playing with this lesson for yourself, and I hope you like it enough to come back to it, then you can pick a side. But for this particular version of the lesson, I'm going to pick the side for you, and we're going to fill in some of what's going on the right side of the plane. So let cool air come in through your nostrils. Notice that it's cool and focus entirely on your right nostril. That doesn't mean that air isn't coming in through the left, but you're going to now focus your imagination entirely on that right nostril. And that's going to give you some interesting feedback as to how important your imagination is and your attention is in this process. So isolate the right nostril in your awareness. Feel the cool air coming in. It can be very nice to spend a long time exploring the path. I'm aware that we have an hour, so we're just going to let it drop softly and warmly down into the space behind your sternum, or between your sternum and your spine at the back, where you've got this nice deeper area of territory around the plane. It's dropping right into the center and then pouring downward into the lower third of your lung on the right. So the lower third, down where the diaphragm is resting on your liver, attached all the way around to those lower ribs, the wider area of the ribs, and the deeper ribs, the floating ribs, the ones that aren't attached. And if you were there for the very beginning and you had Anita's lovely lesson, you could have a balloon there, you could have this image of the expansion in all directions. But here we're going to emphasize the downward. Feel how very much the sensation of filling with air in that lower third of the right lung is a downward sensation towards and into your abdomen. And as we expand downward, our organs cannot compress. So we softly allow them to shift out of the way so the diaphragm can move freely. And then when the air comes out, it flows back out of your nostril, your right nostril, and it's lovely and warm. This time, cool air comes in through the right nostril, and it's going to come into your center of your sternum again, and then from there it's going to flow up into the right upper lobe of the lung. Smaller area, less space. As you breathe into that space, you can feel you're breathing into the inside of your shoulder blade and the inside of your shoulder joint. And just underneath your collarbone, all these places we've been loving to get close to this week. And the next time the cool air comes in and drops into your sternum, it's going to go in both directions at once. You're going to feel it go up under the collarbone and down into the very lowest area as the diaphragm expands downwards into your abdomen. So your whole right side is beginning to feel a little longer. It's a lengthening process happening. So that if we then, with this next cool flow of air through the right nostril, come to the center of the sternum and allow it to flow sideways into the middle area on the right. Now we're widening, now we're expanding a wide area so that it becomes even wider, takes up more space. And now it's a bigger sensation of making ourselves take up more horizontal space, not just vertical space. So the next time the air comes out, intentionally contract a little more than you need to. So we have an automatic flow of air going very easily in and out that we don't have to monitor, but we can interfere. We can take in more air than we need intentionally, and we can breathe out more air than we would if we just relax everything. It's a slight blowing sensation. You're ever so slightly blowing that warm air out of your right nostril. And then let this air flow in, cool in, warm out, and see what effect it's had on your sense of that dividing plane, that division between the two sides of yourself, left and right. Notice that. How clearly does this breathing process interact with the idea of a sort of imaginary, but in some ways very real central division? The reality of this central division is it's a concept. It's something about ourselves that needs to be there in order for us to function well and coordinate, and is sometimes not clear in those of us who are dyspraxic or are dealing with some element of being on the autistic spectrum. All of that can interfere with our easy internal sense of what's left and what's right. So with this lovely, clear right side of yourself, let your plane now spread out into the world. The plane in the middle of you is dividing the whole of your world into right and left. So let it spread out into the room. It's moving forwards and forwards in direction of the ceiling. It's moving upwards through the center of your skull and out towards the wall above your head. The plane is expanding down between your knees, down towards the wall below you, and into the earth behind you. So this plane is now as big as you would like it to be. You can make it as big as the space you're in now, but it can also spread out into an auditorium. It can be in a very big performing space if you want it to be. Or you can be out in the park and let it spread out into the universe. So just let your attention now come to your right hand. Now, if you were around for Emma's wonderful lesson, and if you weren't, it's recorded, you can join it at any time, you will have experienced the bell hand, the soft opening and closing of the whole hand structure, fingertips and thumb tip coming towards each other very slowly and gently. Just begin to revisit that, or maybe it's your first time for the bell. The bell has a soft flowing quality. I very much agree with Emma. It makes me think of sea creatures undulating through the water. And the idea is that the movement is simple. The whole hand moves at once. Every part of the hand is moving either towards, bringing the fingertips towards, or bringing everything away. But it doesn't need to stretch. It can stretch. There's no rules here. But for now, we're not going to need it to be stretchy and spread the fingers. When it's the bell, it's staying very softly within a range of motion that you can maintain easily for a long time. Very much the opposite of effort, but like the VU sound, like the eyes, this all occupies a lot of the brain territory. Your brain thinks it's very important what you're doing with your hands. It's very interested in what you're doing with your voice. It's very curious about what you're looking at with your eyes. And so the territory for these structures is huge. The neural territory for your thigh, your whole thigh, is smaller than that for your thumb. So as you begin to engage with this opening and closing of the right hand, gently roll your arm, if it isn't in this position already, so that your fingertips are stroking the surface that you're lying on. So that as you open your bell, your fingertips separate away from each other, and as you close your bell, they come towards each other while simultaneously sensing the contact of the ground. And feel what this probably flattish thing feels like. And then gently bring this hand to the center of your chest, and it can meet your other hand, it can meet your left hand, so that you're making, it's a little like a prayer shape, your two hands touching together over your heart. So you can feel the fingertips and the heel of the hands, and it's right over that eye in the middle of your sternum that you may still have from Saturday's lovely lesson. And then leave your left hand where it is. So in your imagination, your hands are either side of the plane. Your left hand is resting on the left side of the plane and your right hand's resting on the right side of the plane. And just let your hand, thinking of that soft feeling of the bell, but not yet doing it. Let's keep the hand a little flat to start with, and let it begin to explore the right side of the plane, the part of the plane that spreads out into the world around you, forwards and upwards and downwards towards your knees. Very softly, your hand is moving and exploring. And see if you can begin with the flat surface. So see if your hand can keep that sort of touching the other hand shape, the flat shape, and just stroke. Again, this is only because it's interesting, not because it's a rule. Because I can see some of you have already got this nice idea that I suddenly had yesterday when I was thinking about this, that your fingers could stroke the plane from the right side in a very similar way to you've just been stroking the floor. So you can let your fingertips find that central place and move softly. If you do it this way, the fingertips stay where they are and the palm moves. This is the sort of cool thing we do in Feldenkrais all the time. We have a concept of proximal and distal. The proximal closer to the center, you know, right in the middle of humans is our heart and our spine, our guts. And that's very proximal, and then very distal are these fingertips. But it's a relative term. So with the hand, the center of the palm is proximal, proximal, yeah, and the fingertips are distal. So when you do this bell movement and combine it with this central plane, your fingertips stay on the plane defining the central line, and your palm is moving towards and away. It's a nice thing to explore and play with, I hope. And then have a rest, have a rest. Let your attention disengage, let yourself expand out into the room. You can listen to the sounds coming from outside. Maybe you have people in the house you can hear moving about. Maybe there's some gorgeous animal nearby. I can see a few of those whose breathing you can hear. And then the lovely thing that the bell gives us an option to play with is if we find a soft fluid bell, one that doesn't stop just as the jellyfish undulating through the water doesn't stop, that undulating hand and its softness and its fluidity can infect the rest of our movement. So that yesterday Emma suggested you could get up. Now you could do a whole two-day workshop on getting up with the bell. So this is a little bit of a précis, of a fabulous process you can engage with whenever you become interested enough to do a bit more Feldenkrais. But for now, we will see if you can gently find a way to roll so that you're sitting, and then come to standing while maintaining this soft bell movement in your hand, and if you like it, vooing away as well. See if you can voo and bell and roll and eventually arrive on your 2 feet, and then just stand for a while and compare right and left. I'm going to stand back a bit. I can see myself and you a little bit. There we go. So now you have this plane, and it's changed its orientation to the room, but not to you. This orientation, this is yours. What's right of you is always right of you. What's left of you is always left of you. This is why we need language to explain what it is to the stage or to the audience. So just let everything stand for a while and allow yourself to feel what your weight is doing on the feet. You've had so many lovely explorations of what you're doing in standing. But just see for yourself, how much of you is right, how much of you is left, what does your right side feel like, what does your left side feel like, and then when you're ready, take this plane for a walk around the room and notice how right and left in the room respond to you. I did a wonderful course with Arlene Zones about working with children. She had a lot of experience of working with people with quite severe autism, but I think there's a lot of mild neurological symptoms that we're often dealing with. And if anyone here has had that experience of not being very good with left and right, I tried to learn to drive while having no clear sense of left and right. And that is not easy, I tell you. It doesn't work very well at all. And one of the things that happens during the Feldenkrais training is that gets easier and clearer. I'm not going to speculate on all the possible reasons why. I think there are many reasons why. But just filling in this central line and clarifying it can be very interesting. So once you've had a little walk around, when you're ready to come and lie down, just let everything go for a moment. Have a good break, have a little ease, let everything go. Reconnect with that lovely, massive planet that's gravity holds everything onto the earth, including our atmosphere, and yet is so amenable that when you drop something, you can pick it up with ease. That's it. There's the whole power of the planet. This is why it's called it's called a weak force. Gravity is because it may well be holding the whole planet together, but if you drop a pin, you can pick it up with ease. The planet doesn't fight you. So come back to lying. You may prefer your legs standing. You might like to have a period of having your legs long. You may want a little fidget again. These very imagination-focused lessons can mean that we get a little more fixed in our position of lying. So whenever you want to have a little wiggle or a fidget, that's a nice thing to do. And now let's go to the VU with a little more intention rather than just having it as a background. Find your lip shape, the shape of V. Find the U sound that you can make very internally. Put the two together and sustain. Sustain the VU and feel that same sensation of as the air leaves you on the right, you are contracting on the right, everything's condensing as the air flows out of you. And have a little play with the idea that when you run out of air, you can just relax that whole right side and let the air flow back in. That can take a little practice, but singers and wind players and horn players have usually already practiced this kind of breath, and it's very easy for them. So you blow the air out all the way until you run out, all the way until you've, like a performer, like a singer, you've had to, harvest that last little bit of air. You haven't bypassed it. And at the end of that, let everything go on this long right side, let it go back to length, let the air flow in. Feldenkrais talks about this kind of breath, but he doesn't call it what it's usually called. What it's usually called is the recoiling breath. Push the air out and it comes back in. Singers rely on this all the time. Horn players rely on this all the time. So So there we are with the right side. Maybe we'll spend a little bit of the remaining time filling in the left, because the left is particularly special. So close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Let your attention go to the cool air coming in your left nostril. And it comes in and it drops down through the throat and it arrives in the center of your chest, in the sternum. This is where the bronchus is. This is where the big trunk of the lungs is. And it drops to there. And then from there, it's going to spread out into, actually, you've only got 2 lobes on the left. So it's going to the lower half of the left lung. So feel it flow in, arrive in the area of the diaphragm, and there's expansion downwards into your abdomen. Having a nice low positioned balloon that fills up this space is a lovely image for that. But you can feel a soft opening in your rib cage, very low down. And maybe a kind of expansion, a bulging in your abdomen. Notice that, notice the sensation. And then the next time, this is something you can spend a lot of time on if you like it. And, this can blend very nicely into a kind of Feldenkrais version of meditative or mindfulness practice. But we're going a little quickly now. We want to get everything fitted in nicely, I hope. So in through the left nostril, down through the center of your throat, down into the center of your chest. And now it's going to separate out and flow into that upper left chest area, under the collarbone, inside the shoulder blade, inside the shoulder joint. Not so much lung there, not such a big expansion. But when you put these two together, when you join the lower half, the lower lung lobe and the upper lung lobe, when you join them together in your breath, they nestle around the heart. The heart on the left is inside this sort of breathy, protective space. So the next time the air flows into your nostrils and fills out both sides here, the lower and the upper of the left, pause for a moment. Don't hold your breath in any sort of uncomfortable way. Let it go as soon as you want to, but just when you pause, listen inside for your heart. When I say listen, there are sounds to hear, but listen is a nice alternative to the visual imagery of paying attention to our internal space. Can you feel perhaps some of the beating? Or can you feel maybe something more like the density of the heart? The heart is very much denser in matter than the lungs. The lungs are very spongy and elastic. The heart has a big job to do, and it does it all the time. Pound, pound, pound. It can be the place that interferes with our comfort on stage. But you breathe into this, and then, you can do a little bit of real affectionate attention to your heart. How does it feel inside? And then when you breathe out, when you exhale and focus on the warm air coming out of your left nostril, now there's a kind of soft contraction happening, squeezing around the heart. Always been interested in, breathing practices. I started my singing with quite a lot of asthma problems. So, breathing as something I needed to improve, not just master as a performing skill, was always relevant to me. And very aware of some of the wonderful practices that are out there in the spiritual world, and particularly yoga. There's a lot of real deep intelligence in the processes of breathing in yoga. But I also discovered that I like what Feldenkrais does with breathing, which is even when we're holding our breath, we don't hold our breath and keep ourselves very rigid. So holding the breath has some interesting information to share, but it doesn't have to involve you stiffening your rib cage. Or do it like you hear suddenly a wonderful bird sound, or you're watching a performance and you pick out something exquisite and you just have that moment of a gasp of awe. Hold the air around your heart just for a moment, like you've seen something wonderful and it's stopped your breath just for a moment. And then let the air out and out and out, and it squeezes, let it squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. That's it. And then this this health side of the breathing, one of the things that fascinated me was this idea that you were massaging your organs when you breathed in this full manner. And that's something I understand a lot better now from an anatomical point of view. But what struck me as very stupid when I finally made the connection is that when we breathe in, we're massaging the organs below the diaphragm. But when we exhale, we're massaging the heart and the lungs and the organs of respiration. So begin to bring into this process a bell opening and closing soft movement with the left hand now. So the left hand opens, soft fingertips moving away from each other. It closes, soft fingertips moving towards each other. Away and towards in this very attentive, curious, not trying very hard to get it right, but just feeling how soft can my fingers be and still move. How easily. And maybe if you haven't already, turn them around so you can gently stroke the surface you're lying on, just feeling that space. Or if you prefer, some of you are bringing that hand into the air, resting on your elbow. That's also very interesting. It's very interesting to move between those two positions, actually, to start with the hands completely rested on the floor and then bend the elbow, bringing the hand forward into the space in front of you, but maintaining the soft movement of the hand that tends to make it a little easier not to make an aggressive or uncomfortable movement with your elbow. And then let it keep coming upwards and forwards and inwards until it can meet your right hand over your sternum. And before we start to move the hand around, just discover for yourself that you can make the bell by moving the palms away, but letting the fingertips stay touching. Right on the center of your sternum. Now, this does not have to coordinate with your breathing. There isn't a rule. There is game to play. It can be very interesting to feel that relationship, opening the hand into a more rounded shape and opening out the ribs. Inhaling and exhaling in time, but it doesn't have to be in time. And as you find these lovely shapes, notice that you are opening a space between the two hands that could be a place that your heart could sit, your image of your heart, so that as you're moving your hands, opening and closing, you're making space for your heart to expand. There's some wonderful research out there now. We have fabulous gadgets for examining the brain, fabulous gadgets for understanding our nervous system better. And one of the things that has become very familiar is the statement that singing is good for their health. And if you dig in, what you discover is that all the research has been done on choirs. And what happens in choirs is that when people sing together, their hearts synchronize. But what's even more joyful is that actually that happens with audiences as well. So the other little bit of research out there that is really interesting to me, and I hope to you, is that audiences watching plays also start to synchronize. A lot of that is around listening and what listening does to us as groups together. We're very vocal, we're very interested in each other's noises, and we listen and listen. And listening tunes us into something. So when we're performing, I think we're taking this heart and we're sharing it with the audience. And the more present and comfortable we feel, the more that heart connection is happening over the distance with the other performers we're with on stage and with the audience in front of us. And just being able to tune into our heart a little more easily has a lovely element. So let's add one last thing. Let's add the VU again. And just for a while with your eyes closed, VU with your whole, it doesn't have to be right and left, let it be the whole self, and see if you can let some of that vibration connect to your heart and your gut and your pelvic floor and your skull. And then when you run out of air, see if you can soften yourself to just allow the air to come back in very freely and easily. And then when you're ready, you can play with rolling to sit and coming to standing. Bell hands available if you want to play with them. VU available if you want to play with it, so that you end up coming to standing and being ready to have a little walk around and see how you feel. Because we come very close to the end. Have an explore of how you feel. Let your central plane spread out into the space. My right and left improved enormously in 4 years of my Feldenkrais training, and it got a lot easier for me to know what I was doing. And I'm sure some of that was the verbal practice of saying left and right over and over again when I was teaching people as well. But a few years ago, I discovered while I was in hospital describing an internal physical sensation of pain inside myself. I was still the wrong way around. And I kept saying to the doctor, on the right side, my right side is really hurting. And eventually the doctor said, you know, that's your left, don't you? And I realized just how long and slow some of these deep changes can be, but they're always fascinating, this whole unraveling of the human nervous system. It's the most fabulous bit of kit in the universe. And Feldenkrais gives you a lovely way to discover exactly how interesting your nervous system is.